The stars had always been kind to humanity. For 300 years, humans lived among the galaxy's great species as builders, healers, and peacemakers. They built stations where others could meet. They sent doctors to dying worlds. They talked when others wanted to fight. The galaxy called them soft. The galaxy called them weak. The galaxy was wrong. Admiral Park Tai-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Soul, reading the report for the 5th time. His hands did not shake. His face did not change. But inside, something ancient and terrible was waking up. New Busan was gone. Not damaged. Not occupied. Gone. 2.3 million people erased in a single night by the Velthari. Dominion, the Velthari were an old species. They had conquered 100 worlds before humans left their own planet. They saw the galaxy as their hunting ground, and every other species as either useful or food. For centuries, they had tested humanity's borders. A ship destroyed here. A colony threatened there. And every time humans had talked, negotiated, found peace. The Velthari thought this was fear. They were about to learn it was patience. Captain Lee Dewan's small ship, the Horizon's Edge, was the first to reach New Busan after the attack. He was a young man, only 32 years old, with kind eyes and a quick smile. When he landed on New Busan, his smile died forever. The cities were burning. Bodies lay in the streets like fallen leaves. Dewan walked through the ruins of what had been a school. Small shoes, colorful bags, a child's drawing of a family now stained with blood. His camera recorded everything. His tears fell on the lens. They didn't fight back, his officer whispered. There were no soldiers here, only families. Dewan picked up a small toy, a stuffed animal, burned on one side. A little girl had loved this once. She had given it a name. She had slept with it every night. Now she was gone, and the toy was all that remained of her dreams. Send everything to Earth, Dewan said. His voice was empty. The Parliament needs to see. Everyone needs to see. Ambassador Kim Yuna had served the coalition for 40 years. She had white hair now, and lines around her eyes from decades of smiling at species who looked down on her kind. She had begged, bargained, and bent so many times to keep peace. Today, she would bend no more. The Coalition Council chamber was vast. Representatives from 100 species sat in their floating seats, watching as Yuna walked to the central platform. The Velthari ambassador, a tall creature with scales like polished metal, was already laughing. You wish to complain again, little human? He said, Your people were warned. You've built too close to our territory. We simply corrected the situation. Yuna looked at him. She had looked at many Velthari over the years. She'd always tried to see the good in them. Today, she saw only the dead of New Busan. 2.3 million, she said. Children, elderly, families eating dinner, students studying for exams, all dead. For building homes too close to an invisible line, the council murmured. The elder species exchanged glances. The Velthari ambassador waved his clawed hand. Territory is territory. Your species should have taught its people to respect boundaries. Yuna turned to the council. We request justice. We request the coalition to act against this clear violation of the peace accords. Silence. Then the council speaker, an ancient being from a dying species, cleared his throat. The Velthari have historical claims to the region. We advise both parties to seek diplomatic solutions. The council takes no action at this time. No action. 2.3 million dead, and no action. YUNA stood very still. On Earth, the footage from New Busan had reached every screen in every home. People watched in silence. Then the silence became something else. Parents held their children tighter. Veterans put on old uniforms. Young people who had never known war began to understand why their grandparents had built those quiet facilities on distant moons. The human parliament met in emergency session. For the first time in 3 centuries, every representative from every human world voted as one. No debates. No delays. Just one word, spoken by 800 voices. Yes, Ambassador Kim Yuna received the message on her personal device. She read it twice. Then she walked back to the central platform. The council fell silent. Even the Velthary ambassador stopped laughing. Something in her face had changed. The kind grandmother was gone. In her place stood something older. Something that remembered why humanity had once been feared on their own world. "This council has chosen to do nothing," Yuna said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "So humanity will act alone." Act. The Velthary ambassador laughed again, but it was nervous now. "What will you do, human? Build us a hospital. Send us doctors? You are the galaxy's servants. You do not fight." Yuna looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke 7 words that would echo through history. "The Human Federation formally declares war." Species who had watched humanity for centuries could not believe what they heard. War? From the peacekeepers? From the builders and healers? It was like watching a lamb announce it would hunt wolves. The Velthary ambassador recovered first. His laugh was loud and cruel. "War? You have no army. You have no weapons. You have spent 300 years being soft. We will finish you in a week." Yuna did not respond. She simply turned and walked out of the chamber. Her steps were slow and steady. She did not look back. On the Eternal Soul, Admiral Park Tai-ho put down the report. He looked at the stars through his window. For 300 years, humanity had chosen peace. They had built their military in secret, hoping never to use it. They had developed weapons no species had ever seen, praying they would rust in storage. They had trained soldiers who had never fired a shot in anger. Now the prayers were over. The rust would be cleaned. The shots would be fired. "Send the order to all fleets," Tai-ho said quietly. "Operation Awakening begins now." The galaxy thought it knew humanity. The galaxy was about to learn how wrong it had been. The sleeping giant had opened its eyes. And for the first time in 300 years, humanity was not smiling. 3 weeks passed after the declaration. The galaxy waited. Nothing happened. On every station and every world, the Velthary mocked humanity openly. Their broadcasts showed human ambassadors leaving coalition meetings. Their comedians made jokes about the war that never came. Their generals gave interviews promising to discipline. "The humans soon," they declared, "war," and then hid the Velthary High Commander. Vesok said on a popular broadcast. "This is what happens when soft species pretend to be warriors. We almost feel sorry for them." In the darkness between stars, something was moving. Humanity was not hiding. Humanity was preparing. General Cho Myra had waited her entire life for this moment. She was 63 years old, the gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many intelligence reports about Velthary atrocities. Every human general before her had trained for a war that never came. They had built plans, tested weapons, and prayed the plans would gather dust forever. Now, the dust was being swept away. She stood in Earth's War Command, a facility buried deep under a mountain range. Screens covered every wall. Each screen showed a fleet. There were hundreds of them. Ships that had been built in secret, hidden in places the galaxy never thought to look. Weapons that human scientists had developed during 3 centuries of peace. "All fleets report ready," her aide said. Myra nodded. She looked at the main screen showing Velthary fleet movements. They were sending 400 warships to human border colonies. They expected no resistance. They expected frightened civilians and empty defenses. "Let them come," Mira said softly. Dr. Baekjeong was 70 years old. She had spent 40 of those years in laboratories on distant moons, building weapons she hoped would never be used. Her hair was white, her hands were steady, and her mind was sharp as the laser system she had invented. When the war began, her facilities activated across 100 worlds. Machines that had slept for decades came alive. Production lines started moving. Weapons that the galaxy had never imagined began rolling out of hidden factories. "Doctor, we are at full production," her assistant reported. Jiyoung looked at the weapon in her hands. It was small, elegant, and could punch through any shield the Veltari had ever built. "I dreamed of exploring stars," she said quietly. "Instead, I built tools for killing. Let us hope humanity uses them wisely." Lieutenant Han Suman was 25 years old. She had joined the fleet because she wanted to see the galaxy. She had trained on simulators that felt like games. She had never fired a weapon at a living being. Now she sat in her fighter, waiting in the shadow of a gas giant. Around her, 10,000 other fighters waited in perfect silence. Their engines were cold, their weapons were hot, and their pilots were ready. "This is Admiral Park Tai-ho," a voice came through her helmet. "You know what they did to New Busan? You know why we are here? Today, we show the galaxy who we really are. Not the servants they expected, not the builders they tolerated. Today, they see the truth. Make every shot count, and come home alive." Suman's hands tightened on her controls. She thought of the footage from New Busan, the small shoes, the burned toys, the families who never had a chance. For New Busan, she whispered, the Veltari invasion fleet dropped out of faster than light. Out travel near the human colony of Haven's Rest, 400 warships, gleaming with weapons, confident in their power. Their commander, a veteran of 30 conquests, gave the order to begin bombardment. The order never completed. From the darkness around them, human ships appeared. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. They came from behind moons, from inside asteroid fields, from places the Veltari had never thought to check. And they were not the small, weak vessels the galaxy expected. Each human ship was a masterpiece of hidden development. Their shields were stronger than anything in known space. Their weapons fired beams that passed through Veltari armor like water through paper. Their pilots moved with coordination that seemed impossible. Lieutenant Han Suman fired her first shot. It hit a Veltari destroyer's engine. The ship went dark and began drifting. "Target disabled," she reported. Her voice was calm. Her hands were steady. The training had prepared her well around her. The battle became a demonstration. Human ships moved in perfect patterns. They targeted engines, weapons, and shields. They did not aim to kill crews. They aimed to end the fight. 11 minutes. That was all it took. When the light faded and the debris stopped spinning, 400 Veltari warships had been reduced to floating metal. Some were destroyed. Most were simply disabled, their crews alive but helpless. Not a single human ship was lost. On Earth, General Cho Myra watched the battle end. She felt no joy. War was not something to celebrate. But she felt something else. Relief. The weapons worked. The training held. Humanity could defend itself. She opened a channel to the Coalition Council. Her message was simple. We gave you 300 years of peace. You gave us 2.3 million dead. Now you will see why we chose peace. It was never because we could not fight. It was because we hoped we would never have to. The message spread across the galaxy in hours. Intelligence agencies scrambled for information. How had humans developed this technology? How had they hidden it so completely? How long had they been capable of this? The Veltari High Commander this SOC received the casualty reports in silence. 400 ships. Gone in 11 minutes. Against an enemy he had mocked just days before. What have we awakened? He whispered. In the Coalition Council chamber, the delegates sat in stunned silence. The Veltari ambassador was gone, recalled to his homeworld in disgrace. The other species looked at humanity's empty chair with new eyes. They had called humans soft. They had called them weak. They had treated them like servants for 3 centuries. Now, they understood the truth. Humans had not been weak. They had been patient. They had not been soft. They had been merciful. And mercy, as the galaxy was learning, could be taken away. The sleeping giant was fully awake now, and it was very, very angry. The human fleets moved into Veltari space like a slow tide. They did not rush. They did not rage. They advanced with the calm patience of a species that had waited 300 years for this moment. Commander Yoon Hana stood on the bridge of the Mercy's Hand, a ship with an unusual mission. While other commanders led warships, Hannah led humanitarian vessels. Her job was not to destroy. Her job was to save. When the human fleet arrived at the first Velthari border world, they did not attack. Instead, Hannah's ships moved forward and began broadcasting on all channels. Attention, Velthari civilians. This is the Human Federation. We have no conflict with you. Please evacuate to the designated safe zones. You have 72 hours. Take your families. Take your belongings. We will not harm you. The Velthari on the planet were confused. Their military commanders laughed at first. This was a trick, they said. Humans were trying to make them lower their guard. But the hours passed, and human ships simply waited. They formed a protective ring around the civilian evacuation routes. When Velthari transport ships lifted off carrying families, human fighters escorted them to safety. One Velthari mother, carrying her young child, looked out her window at the human ships protecting them. She had been taught that humans were weak and foolish. Now those weak and foolish creatures were saving her family, while her own military prepared to sacrifice them. Why? She whispered to no one. After 72 hours, the evacuation was complete. Hannah confirmed that all civilian ships had reached safety. Then she gave the order. Military targets only begin. The human attack was surgical. They did not bomb cities. They did not burn farms. They targeted barracks, weapons factories, and military shipyards with precision that seemed impossible. One moment, a massive military base stood proud. The next moment, it was ash. The apartment buildings next door remained untouched. Sergeant Kong Junho was a medic. He had joined the military because he wanted to help people, not hurt them. When the ground forces landed to secure captured areas, Gunho went with them. He found wounded Velthari soldiers in the ruins of a barracks. They looked at him with fear, expecting death. Instead, Yunho knelt beside them and opened his medical kit. "I am going to help you," he said slowly. "Do not be afraid." The Velthari soldiers stared at him. Blood leaked from his wounds. His eyes were wide with shock. You are supposed to kill us," the soldier whispered. "We are not you," Junho replied simply. He began treating the wounds with gentle hands. Word spread quickly through the Velthari ranks. Human soldiers were not killing prisoners. Human medics were treating wounded enemies. Human ships were escorting civilian refugees to safety. The humans fought like demons on the battlefield, became healers the moment the shooting stopped. High Commander Thesok received report after report. His military installations were being destroyed with impossible accuracy. His fleets were being crushed in every engagement. But his civilians were mostly unharmed. "I do not understand," he told his advisors. "They have the power to destroy us completely. Why do they hold back?" An old advisor, a scholar who had studied humans for decades, spoke carefully. "Because they are not fighting to destroy us, Commander. They are fighting to win. There is a difference." "What difference?" "Destruction creates nothing but ashes and hatred. Victory creates possibility. The humans want us to surrender, not disappear. They want us to remember this war not as a massacre, but as a lesson." The Sock sat with this thought. On his world, victory meant total domination. It meant burning the enemy's cities and enslaving their children. The idea of winning while preserving the enemy was foreign to him, and somehow that made it more terrifying. In the Coalition Council, the debate raged. Several species demanded that the Coalition stop humanity's advance. The humans were becoming too powerful, they argued. They must be contained. But others pointed to the numbers. In 2 months of war, human forces had killed approximately 800,000 Velthari soldiers. Tragic, but war was war. In those same 2 months, human forces had killed exactly 0 Velthari civilians, not one. They had actually saved more Velthari non-combatants than the Velthari military had saved human. Civilians on New Bus, Ambassador Kim Yuna, returned to the council chamber. She was tired. The war weighed on her shoulders like a mountain. But her voice was still strong. You ask why we fight this way, she said. I will tell you. We fight this way because we are human. We remember every death we cause. We carry every life we take. When this war ends, we want to be able to look in the mirror. We want to know that we did not become the monsters we are fighting. A delegate from a neutral species asked the question everyone was thinking. What happens when you reach their homeworld? 10 billion Veltheri live there. Will your mercy extend to them? Una was quiet for a long moment. That will depend on them, she finally said. We will offer them the same choice we have offered every world. Surrender and live. Fight and face the consequences. But we will never, never target civilians. Not even if they beg us to. We will not become them. On the front lines, the human advance continued. Every world received the same warning. Every world was given the same 72 hours. And every world watched as human soldiers protected their families while destroying their defenses. The Veltheri were learning what it meant to face humanity at war. It was not the destruction they had expected. It was something far more unsettling. It was discipline. It was precision. It was a species that could kill millions without losing its soul, and as their homeworld came into range of human fleets, the Veltheri began to understand the true horror of their situation. They had awakened a giant that could destroy them completely, but chose not to. And somehow, that mercy was the most frightening thing of all. The Veltheri homeworld hung in space like a blue and silver jewel. 10 billion souls lived on that world. Mothers raising children, farmers growing food, artists creating beauty, ordinary people who had never asked for war. Admiral Park Tae-ho looked at the planet through his window. His fleet surrounded it completely. 3,000 human warships, each one capable of destroying entire cities, waited for his command. He had the power to end the Veltheri species in a single hour. He had the power to turn that jewel into Ashdot. The orders from Earth sat on his desk. He had read them 3 times. Each time he felt the weight of human history pressing on his shoulders. Every choice humanity had ever made led to this moment. Every lesson learned, every war fought, every peace built. All of it came down to him, standing in this room. Looking at a world he could destroy. Admiral, his aide said quietly. The Veltheri High Council has requested to speak with you. Put them through. The screen lit up with the image of Elder Matriarch Sola. She was ancient by Veltheri standards, her scales faded to pale silver, her eyes heavy with centuries of memory. She was the last leader of a dying empire, and she knew it. Human commander, she said, her voice cracked with age and fear. We wish to discuss terms. Tae-ho nodded slowly. I am listening. We will surrender completely. Disband our military. Pay whatever reparations you demand. Allow any monitoring you require. We accept any terms you offer. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice broke. We only ask that you spare our children. Our world has 10 billion people. Most of them never wanted this war. Please, Admiral. Please do not do to us what we did to New Busan. Silence filled the room. Tae-ho thought of New Busan. He thought of the footage he had watched 100 times. The small shoes. The burned toys. The families who never saw the attack coming. He thought of his own daughter, safe on Earth. He thought of every human child who had watched their parents go to war. He thought of what kind of galaxy he wanted them to grow up in. Matriarch, he said slowly, I will read you our terms. Listen carefully. Celeste braced herself. She expected the worst. Slavery. Sterilization. Perhaps even extinction. It was what her people would have demanded. First, Tae-ho said, you will disband all military forces within 1 year. Second, you will pay reparations to the families of New Busan. Third, you will allow humanitarian workers to operate freely on your worlds. Fourth, you will participate in the creation of new galactic laws protecting civilians in all future conflicts. He paused. That is all. Soleth stared at him. She could not believe what she was hearing. That is all? You will not. You will not destroy us? You will not enslave our people? You will not take our children? Taiho looked at her with eyes that carried 300 years of human patience. "We are not you, matriarch. We never were. But you could destroy us. You have the power. Why would you not use it?" The answer came not from Taiho, but from his heart, because we are human. And if we become what we fight, we lose more than any war could take from us. We lose ourselves. On a captured Velthari station, Private Moon Yunji stood guard over a group of prisoners. She was 21 years old. She had grown up on New Busan. Her mother had died in the attack. Her little brother, only 6 years old, had died in her mother's arms. Yunji looked at the Velthari prisoners. They were soldiers, but they looked small and afraid now. One of them was young, probably her age. He had scales the color of autumn leaves and eyes full of terror. She had dreamed of this moment. She had dreamed of revenge. She had imagined making them feel what her family had felt. The pain, the fear, the helplessness. Her hand rested on her weapon. No one would stop her. No one would blame her. Every human in the fleet would understand. The young Velthari soldier looked at her and saw death in her eyes. He closed his own eyes, waiting for the end. Youngji's hand shook. Tears ran down her face. She saw her brother's smile. She heard her mother's voice reading bedtime stories. She remembered the last thing her mother had ever told her. "Be kind, Yonji. The galaxy has enough cruelty. Be kind." Slowly, Yunji lowered her weapon. She turned away from the prisoners. She walked to the observation window and looked out at the stars. "I miss you, Mom," she whispered. "I hope I made you proud." Behind her, the young Velthari soldier opened his eyes. He watched the human woman crying quietly by the window. He did not understand. He could not understand. But somewhere deep inside him, something changed. Something that had been taught to hate began to wonder if hatred was a choice. The treaty was signed 3 days later. Admiral Park Taeho and Matriarch Soleth pressed their marks onto the document that ended the war. Around them, cameras broadcast the ceremony to a watching galaxy. "The war lasted for months," Taeho said to the assembly. "We lost 12,000 soldiers. The Velthari lost 1.2 million. But after we declared war, not a single civilian on either side died from human weapons. Not one. This is who we are. This is who we will always be." The galaxy watched humans shake hands with their defeated enemy. They watched human doctors begin treating Velthari wounded. They watched human engineers start planning the rebuilding of destroyed military bases into schools and hospitals. And every species in the galaxy asked the same question. What kind of people? Forgive an enemy who killed 2.3 million of their children. The answer, they were beginning to understand, was humans. Only humans. And perhaps that was why they had been underestimated for so long. Because the galaxy could not imagine a species that chose mercy when revenge was so easy. Admiral Park Taeho returned to his ship that night. He sat alone in his quarters, looking at a photograph of his daughter. The weight of victory pressed on him. So many dead, so much destruction, but also perhaps a new beginning. "Let this be the last war," he whispered to the stars. "Let us build something better." 5 years had passed since the war ended. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Ambassador Kim Yuna walked through the halls of the new coalition building. It was larger than the old one, built on a neutral world where all species could meet as equals. Human architects had designed it with Velthari engineers. The walls held art from 100 worlds. The gardens grew flowers from every corner of the galaxy. Yuna was Secretary General now. The coalition had voted unanimously to give her the position. Not because humanity had won the war, because humanity had shown the galaxy a new way to win. She stopped at a window overlooking the central plaza. Below, children from dozens of species played together. A human girl chased a Velthari boy through a fountain. They were laughing. Neither of them remembered the war. To them, the other was simply a friend. "The new accords are ready for signing, Madam Secretary," Raid said. Yuna nodded and walked toward the council chamber. The new laws she had spent 5 years building were about to become reality. No species could attack civilian populations. No empire could expand by conquest. All disputes must go through arbitration before any military action. And any species that broke these rules would face the united response of every coalition member. These were not human laws. They were galactic laws now. But everyone knew where they came from. Everyone knew who had paid the price to prove they were necessary. In a laboratory on a distant moon, Dr. Beek Jiang smiled at her newest creation. It was not a weapon this time. It was a ship engine, faster and more efficient than anything the galaxy had ever seen. "The prototype is ready for testing," her assistant said excitedly. Ji Young nodded. For 40 years, she had built machines for killing. Now she built machines for exploring. Her weapons still existed, locked away in storage, maintained but never used. They were a warning, not a promise. A young Velthari student stood nearby, watching the engine with wide eyes. His name was Korith, and he had come to learn from the famous human scientist. "Dr. Beek," he said hesitantly, "may I ask you something?" "Of course." "My grandfather fought in the war. He told me that humans could have destroyed our entire species. But you did not. Why?" Jiang was quiet for a moment. She thought of New Busan. She thought of the weapons she had built. She thought of the choice humanity had made when revenge was within reach. "Revenge is easy," she said finally. "Building something better is hard. We choose hard." Kareth looked at her with new understanding. He had grown up hearing stories of human cruelty, human weakness, human foolishness. Now he was beginning to understand that the stories were wrong. Humans were not weak because they chose mercy. They were strong because they could choose destruction, but did not. Captain Li Doan stood on the bridge of his new ship. The New Dawn. It was not a warship. It was an exploration vessel, equipped with the best sensors, the fastest engines, and the most advanced laboratories humanity could build. His crew was the first of its kind, 20 humans. 10 Velthari. A dozen members from other species. They had trained together for 2 years. They had learned each other's languages, customs, and dreams. Now they were about to do what humanity had always wanted to do. "Course laid in, Captain," his navigator said. She was human, a young woman named Song Jun, with stars in her eyes. "Destination?" Doan asked. "The Outer Rim. Unexplored space. No one has ever been there before." Doan smiled. It was the first real smile he had worn since New Busan. The war had taken something from him. This mission was giving something back. "Let us see what is out there," he said. Together. The New Dawn jumped to faster than light speed, leaving behind a galaxy that was slowly learning to be better. On New Busan. Admiral Park Taiho walked through a field of flowers. He was retired now, his uniform packed away, his battles behind him. But he came here every year on this day, the anniversary of the attack. A memorial stood in the center of the field. It was a wall of names, 2.3 million names carved into stone that would never fade. Fresh flowers lay at its base. People came from across human space to leave them. To remember, to promise that it would never happen again. Taiho found the names he was looking for. A family he had never met. A mother, a father, 2 children. They had died in their home, eating dinner when the bombs fell. He had read their file 1,000 times. He had carried their memory through every battle. "We did not forget you," he whispered to the names. "We made sure they never will either." He looked up at the sky. Human ships patrolled alongside Velthari vessels now. They protected each other. They trusted each other. It had taken 5 years to build that trust, but it was real. A little girl ran past him chasing a butterfly. She laughed with pure joy, unaware of the history beneath her feet. Her parents called to her from nearby, smiling at her happiness. This was why they had fought. This was why they had won. Not for revenge, not for glory. For this. For children laughing in fields where millions had died. For a future where the next generation would never know the fear their parents had known. Taiho watched the girl catch her butterfly, hold it gently, and let it go. She waved goodbye as it flew away, then ran back to her parents. "Be kind," he said softly, remembering the words that had guided humanity through its darkest hour. "The galaxy has enough cruelty. Be kind." He turned and walked away from the memorial. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. New flowers were growing where ashes had once fallen. Life went on. The galaxy had crossed a line. They had expected destruction. They received justice. They expected rage. They received resolve. They expected monsters. They found humans. And humans, as the galaxy learned, were far more terrifying than monsters, because humans could choose to be anything. They could choose hatred or love, revenge or forgiveness, destruction or creation. They chose to build. They chose to heal. They chose to show the galaxy that strength was not measured in how many enemies you could kill, but in how many you could choose not to. That was humanity's gift to the stars. That was why. In the end, the galaxy was grateful. The line had been crossed. But on the other side, something beautiful was growing.